I just hit record. So I guess yesterday was a busy day for you. Tell me where you were, how it all began. I guess a quick Reader's Digest of the rundown of what happened yesterday.
Sure. Went into the chambers at 1 o'clock to certify the Electoral College votes. When we came in, we had a joint meeting with the Senate. They came in, kind of read the rules, and then we started going down the list, the vice president. And Arizona was the first one that was contested. Once that happens, you debate 2 hours per side. Senate side gets 2 hours, House side gets 2 hours. And we were probably 30 minutes into the debate when the Sergeant of Arms, you could see them scurrying around. They came in and talked to Ms. Pelosi and talked to Mr. Hoyer. And then they came back in and pretty rapidly took all the leadership out. Steve Scalise, Kevin McCarthy, Pelosi, Hoyer. And then they told us to get our gas masks, which were under all of our seats. And we opened those up. They then said, you're going to need to get down, because there was a roar that was outside the halls. Where we vote is pretty soundproof, but you could hear a loud roar that gradually got up. We could tell they were outside the doors. Started hearing the doors shake, baseball bats beating the windows out. There were two main doors that they went in. Furniture was put up to block them from getting in because they swung inside the chamber. The guards had their guns drawn, and the lady there were 4 people killed. The lady that was killed had broken out a window and was crawling through, and had a lot of people behind her. So that's when they got us out. Said, let's go to a secure location. First one we went to was not secured. It took us to another one, and the Capitol's got a lot of tunnels that is hard to navigate, particularly those who were elderly. And we had one in a wheelchair. But anyway, they did, and we went to the second one. We were told to get away from the windows, and we stayed there about 4 hours, 5 hours. Went back into the chambers at probably 10:30, 11 o'clock at night. Stayed there until 4:30.
And you guys finished the business yesterday.
We did.
A big question today, a lot of people are asking is, the rally before they marched to the Capitol. Rudy Giuliani out there was kind of, telling the crowd, go to the Capitol grounds and let's take this back for the people. President Donald Trump was part of that. I guess, you've been a big supporter of Donald Trump and President Trump and his election and the rhetoric of the GOP. It seems like today is that rhetoric is kind of being pushed back a little bit by some members of the GOP. I guess, are you still supporting President Trump? I guess, what would you say to him if you could speak to him directly and the voters that you represent? Well,
what happened at the Capitol, which this is the first time since 1812 that this Capitol's been breached like this. The people that did this, you have to call them what it is: criminals. They're criminals. Are
they not rioters or thugs and stuff like that? Are we
all the above? But they're criminals. They did a violent act on a building that's federal property. I don't care if they're Trump supporters. I don't care if they're Biden supporters. They're criminals. Just like the quote peaceful protesters that destroyed Seattle, that destroyed Minneapolis. They're criminals, pure and simple. And nobody tolerates that. There's not a Democrat or Republican, a Donald Trump or a Joe Biden that would support tearing up property like they did. Now, I assume, been to rallies. This president attracts a lot of people. This isn't the first rally that he's had where 35,000 people plus were gathered. You didn't have this kind of a protest, not near what you've had in the cities across this country. But let's get that clear. They're criminals. That's what I call them, and thugs, whatever. But they violated a sacred institution that ought to be prosecuted, and we will find out who they were. The police were getting tear gassed by the criminals who had masks on. Now, the issues we were discussing is securing our election process. This is not about Donald Trump and Joe Biden. This is about having a secure voting system that we cast a vote that we know is legitimate. And that's what we were on the 4 states we wanted to debate, get into that, because the mail-in balloting under the guise of COVID was not right. And we want, in my opinion, but we needed some exploration and time to do that. But there's been a lot of rallies, but I don't, they're all blaming it on Trump, but what else is new? They're doing that anyway. But I call it out for what it is, which is a criminal activity that shouldn't be tolerated. And we'll know in the end of the day who was involved with it.
Do you feel like it could have been handled differently from, I guess, the GOP side, where maybe that transition could have been a little bit more smoother, and I guess maybe not given into that, give to that narrative of that rhetoric that, all these false or all these claims of fraud, which have been proven there's not proof of, which we have seen. But do you feel like that's kind of given those people ample emotion to go in and, I guess, do this type act yesterday?
Well, first of all, as far as the proof, they keep saying there's no proof. Mm-hmm. What happened was unconstitutional. And you had states like Georgia, and let me give you an example. They had the Secretary of State who mailed out ballots to every person on the voter list for absentee ballots. That's not the way it should be. I understand where you're coming from, but also, we're facing COVID. So, 2020 was definitely a different year. And, I think states were trying to figure out a way to give people their own ways to vote, regardless of how you feel. Isn't that up to the states to decide how they should handle their voting? That's just the point. The state legislature had to make those rule changes, but it wasn't just mailing the ballots. It was extending the time to, if you made a mistake, you got the individuals let you correct it. They didn't. Some in Pennsylvania, they took off the verification of the signatures. They took off the safeguards to make sure you're who you say you are. Just like a voter, when you go get on an airplane, you have to have a driver's license with an ID. That was not followed here, and it wasn't done by the state legislature. That's wrong. And a safe and secure election is the bedrock of our community, of our country, and we probably have lost some of that. The security. You don't have 1,000 people take affidavits, and if they perjure themselves, they go to jail. You just don't see that. And I've never seen that in the history. Secondly, I think the lesson here is you don't let the criminals get to the point of getting in your building. If you ever been to the Capitol, you got small barriers. Once they jump those barriers, you use tasers, you use tear gas, let the police force. I felt like the police force had the handcuffs. The police force did a tremendous job with what they had, but it's gotten to the point they're scared to do anything. And so that's the 2 lessons I learned, that they've got to not let them get to the point of getting into the building. They were on their heels being pushed back, which is not right. And you give them more power, not less. And I doubt there's anybody in that chamber that will huddle down, Democrat or Republican, that's going to vote for defunding the police. Let them go through this. You let them. It was no time to call a social worker with what we went through. We were, you didn't know whether you're going to be shot, jumped on. It didn't matter. For one police officer to lose his eye, 4 to be dead. We need more police, not less.
Changing, I guess, gears today about what's kind of happening right now, throughout the day this afternoon. Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, they've all asked Mike Pence to start the process of the 25th Amendment. What's your take on that? Is that something that, I know you're probably going to side with the GOP and, say that's crazy and whatnot, but is that something that you're worried about at this moment?
Here's what I know. This president's got 2 weeks. This president has been, the day he got elected, they were talking impeachment then. Collusion with Russia proved completely false. Mueller report, false. impeachment, the grounds with the Ukrainian call, Joe Biden's done far worse than that. And they just don't like this president. Does it shock me? No. Now, with the 25th Amendment, they're going to have to get Vice President Pence to go along with it. Ms. Pelosi, I know, will go along with it because she and Chuck Schumer as head of the Senate. They'll try to do it, but what's to gain out of it? If they're calling for unity for 14 days, they're saying drag the country through this. There's a disconnect there that's not fair for the country, and it shows you how disconnected they are. What's that going to accomplish? We're Americans. We move forward. I'm going to accept, even though I don't like it, I didn't vote for him. I think it was they had issues with him being elected, but I accept it. I'm an American. We're going to move forward and do what's best for the country. And
okay, speaking of that, I guess being the country being divisive and kind of, you got your GOP here, your Dems over here. I guess, how do we bring it all together? How do we heal it? How do we get Republicans and Democrats in the House, in the Senate, in this country, neighbors and stuff like that, to come to the table together and do what's best for the country? How do we do that, especially after what we saw today? Or yesterday. It seems like it's more divisive now than it's ever been.
Well, it's being highlighted because of the results. Now, is there any excuse for what happened to our Capitol? No. What do you do with it? You stop it. And it's no different than somebody breaking in your car. You stop it. And, that's separate from debating issues. We're worlds apart on issues. One thing I like about and been public, I think this president is pro-life. I think he's been pro-amendment, Second Amendment. I think he's been pro-Israel. This Green New Deal, free education, we're worlds apart on that. But that doesn't mean, just like you said, Mark, you can always discuss it and agree to disagree. But if the day comes that if we don't like what we get, we're going to tear up something, that's where it stops. If you and I, and the other thing that people forget, we have an election once every 4 years. Once every 4 years. You had so many states that got it right. But the 6 states really, where the evidence will come out that I think the evidence will show that you had more votes for Mr. Trump, but let that put some sunlight on that and let the people know honest and fair election is the bedrock of our nation. And that's what I want to get back to. But at the end of the day, we're Americans. We're going to do what's best. I want to make sure South Carolina that the mail-in balloting under the guise of the coronavirus will never happen again, where you can't verify who's voting. One person, one vote, legal. And we got away from that this time.
All right, very good. I think we'll wrap it up right there. Let me stop recording.